Yeah. Oh, very cool. So this is a lot more formal than I thought.
No, we just have it hooked up to our Facebook page. Anyone who couldn't make it.
Okay.
Something like that.
Great. So I'm going to keep this really informal since it's a small group, and no interest in really kind of lecturing you. I think you probably hear lots of lectures. I'd love to keep this more give and take, and happy to answer any questions that you've got along the way. So if I say something that you find to be interesting or provocative or just plain out stupid, feel free to throw something at me and ask me. Let me give you a little bit of background on me. And Matt, thanks for inviting me to join you guys here today. Matt spent some time with us over the summer interning at TechNexus and a little bit of experience of what we do there. I am first and foremost an entrepreneur. I've been one since I was 15 years old. I started a company in high school. I've never actually had anybody sign a paycheck for me, and I'm probably unemployable. So that's the first kind of overarching thing that you should know about me. I see the world from that perspective. I also dropped out of college my freshman year, and at the time had about 20 people that were working for me, and so I didn't particularly back then think that pursuing higher education was something that was all that important to me. So I never went back. So you should also know that little fact about me. That said, I'm a huge fan of education. I'm a huge fan of the types of things that you can get out of a college experience, particularly these kinds of experiences. So I think most of you that are in these programs and these kinds of groups know that this is where you're really getting value. The opportunity to engage with people in the private sector, to engage with people that are out there doing that and to learn from them. So hopefully the conversation in the next 45 minutes or so is valuable in that context. I said that I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been one since I was a kid. I also, somewhere along the line, and that's probably 13 or 14 pure startups that I've been a part of, founded from the very beginning, somewhere along the line realized that the thing I'm really, really good at is the start, and the thing that I'm not all that interested in, and therefore probably am not as good at, is the finish. It took me a long time to realize that that's okay, and to surround myself with people who are good at things that I'm not at. Yes?
You said the finish, are you saying selling it or like?
No, I mean, I've sold some companies along the way, but really, what I mean by that is once the company, so starting, creating was really, really exciting to me, but once it got to the point where it was scaling, once it got to the point where it was about repetition and doing the same thing, just doing it well, I generally would lose interest. So about 5 or 6 years ago, now maybe I guess 7, 8 years ago, I created the Illinois Technology Association here in Chicago. I was an entrepreneur. I had a tech company in Chicago. And this was in many ways sort of the dark ages of the tech community here. I mean, there were some really great tech companies in Chicago. They just had no idea that they were tech companies. They didn't identify as that. So a company like Archipelago, there's a guy named Jerry Putnam who's the CEO of Archipelago. Archipelago had 200 software developers working for them at some point. They made software to facilitate the electronic trades of stock. And ultimately, Archipelago merged with the New York Stock Exchange, and that CEO became the president of the New York Stock Exchange. And if you would ask him, I think, at any time during that history, that build-up of that company, what industry he was in, he would have told you that he was in the financial services industry. But then if you said, yeah, but gosh, 85% of your employees look identical to the people sitting across the river at Orbitz, and who, by the way, think they're in the travel industry. And if we, back then, had been in a place like Silicon Valley, we would have all been identifying ourselves as tech companies first, and the customers that we serve or the industries that we serve second. So we created the Technology Association in the early days, primarily because of that. It also was probably a little less glamorous and noble. It also started with a beer party on the roof of my office, where I invited a half dozen friends over to have beer on Friday and talk about their company. And then the next Friday there was a dozen, and then the next Friday there was 2 dozen, and by the end of the summer the fire department shut us down because we had like 400 people hanging out on the roof of my office. And so we said, well, okay, maybe there's sort of a community here. We probably ought to formalize this. And that was really the genesis for creating the original Tech Association in Chicago and beginning to bring all those together. Now that association still exists today. IllinoisTech.org is the URL. My business partner is still the CEO of that organization. Today, it's really focused on the growth stage part of the tech community. So by definition, that means it's a company that's got $1 million in revenue up to multi-billion in revenue. That's about 700 companies that are members of that. And across the Chicago landscape, there's probably somewhere around 1,500 to 1,800 growth stage tech companies. So right here within a stone's throw of us, there's an awful lot of companies that employ an awful lot of people. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 250,000 people are employed at just those growth stage tech companies. And many of them are still really identifying themselves with the industries they serve, real estate or financial services or travel or whatever it is. But more and more, they're beginning to come together and realize the common elements between them. They all are looking for the same sorts of software development talent. They're all looking for the same sorts of commercial and project management and marketing talent. And together as an industry, they are all much stronger. So we created that back in 2005. And then a couple of years later, having created what we thought was the club, we figured we needed a clubhouse. And so we created TechNexus in 2007. Original goal was, again, pretty modest. The original goal was a clubhouse, a common watering hole, a place where the tech community can hang out. Today, there's lots of those. So today, there's places like 1871. There's something like 80 incubators around town. But in 2007, there were none. We were literally the only one to do that. The common watering hole where really the tech community began to coalesce. That happened very quickly. It got to a point really within the first couple of months where all of a sudden we realized there's 3,000 or 4,000 people a month that were hanging out here, that were walking through the doors. And it wasn't just 3,000 or 4,000 random people. It was sort of the right people. It was the right people that you wanted to do business with. It was the entrepreneurs that were actually building successful companies. It was software and engineering talent coming up from universities that were hanging out there, and people that we actually wanted to try to employ. So we kind of looked around and realized, wow, okay, this is an interesting group of people that's coming to this sort of common watering hole of this clubhouse that we built. We weren't the only ones to notice that. Some savvy entrepreneurs also noticed that and realized that these were all the same people that they wanted to do business with. And so I think our very first set of entrepreneurs actually was a fellow who was the former CTO of Borland Software, which you probably don't even know anymore. But back then it was a large database company. Now I think bought by IBM, and I don't even know what happened to it after that. CTO of Borland Software and the former CIO of Credit Suisse Bank. So a couple of fairly serious, accomplished dudes who had been there and done that, and now we're starting doing a startup. And they came to us and said, geez, everybody I need to do business with, everybody I can learn from, is sort of walking through these doors every day. Can I have a desk over in the corner? And so we said, sure, you can have a desk over in the corner, and suddenly there was a few more entrepreneurs asking for that. And then they began to ask for things more than just a desk in the corner. They were, hey, can you introduce me to that person? Can you maybe help me think through my business plan, or help me hire some sort of talent that I need to hire? So really fairly quickly on after creating the clubhouse, we accidentally created an incubator. I say accidentally. It became the most successful incubator that Chicago has ever seen. We've now had some 300 companies that have launched from there. Those companies have raised somewhere close to $400 million in capital while they were based there. Today, there are 65 startups that are based at TechNexus. They employ about 350 people, full-time, real employees, real jobs, making lots of money, and building companies there. They tend to be, and historically have tended to be, more B2B, more enterprise type customers that they focus on. Their software, their hardware. Again, when we created this, we were the only game in town, so there was an awful lot of people who were hanging out there doing lots of different things. Today, it's sort of focused in a little bit more. There are plenty of other places that, if you're 21 years old and you're building an app to find cupcakes, States, and it's your first business, and it's your first thing, and you think it's going to be a world beater, there are lots of other places that you can probably go find people to help you do that. We tend to focus more on people that are trying to build things that are business to business or that are about focused on an industry. Really wanting to not necessarily hit grand slams, but hit a whole bunch of home runs. And so that's a lot of those companies that are there. I think one of the peculiarities of our incubator is that of the 300 or so companies that have launched from there over the last several years, I think something like 80 to 85% of them are actually still in business, which is wildly successful. I mean, almost unheard of in terms of that. And I don't think that's anything that we take credit for as much as just the types of companies that we're attracting there. The fact that they tend to be a bit more mature of an entrepreneur, they tend to probably be a company that already had a tiny little bit of revenue and a reasonably proven out business model. They tend to be focusing on business customers instead of consumer customers. And so just as a result, those types of companies don't necessarily go out of business as quickly or fail as fast as maybe some an app, a dating app. We got another dating app. I don't think there's anything wrong with dating apps, but that's an issue. So back to me for a second. I said I have this crazy entrepreneur's brain thing going on here, where I'm basically unemployable. And I think that add to that, compound to that, not only do I want to be a part of creating businesses or creating things all the time, I also became, as I said, somewhat aware of my limitations as well. My limitations, at least in the sense of what I really enjoyed to do and what I didn't enjoy. What I found over the last 5 or 6 years of doing the incubator, though, is sort of the perfect job for me, which is that instead of working on a startup, I now literally get to work on a dozen different startups a day. Instead of my short attention span being distracted by a shiny object that says, you did this for 6 months, now go do something new. I literally, if I want to, can get up and go from room to room throughout the day and work on a different startup for an hour at a time, which really helps me. Right? It's the thing that I'm good at and the thing that I want to do. And it seems to be valuable to a lot of the companies that we mentor and work with. So that's where we are today. The accidental incubator became kind of the most successful incubator. Today, we're now thinking more globally, a little bit bigger picture. So while Chicago is home, it's now also just home base, and there's a much larger playing field for us. And particularly now that we're not the only people in Chicago that are thinking about how to support early stage companies or startups, we also begin to sort of refine our focus a little bit more. The thing that now excites me is not just startups. The thing that now excites me is I think we are in the single most disruptive period in economic history. And I don't know if very many people fully appreciate that that's not hyperbole. Over the last 10 years, 734 of the Fortune 1000, so largest 1,000 companies in the United States. Over the last 10 years, 734 of them that were on the list a decade ago are no longer on the list today. A 74% churn rate amongst the largest companies in the country. In fact, I think of the Fortune 500, at least half won't exist in 10 years. And I don't mean they won't be on the list. I mean, in my opinion, they won't exist in 10 years. They will have merged away. They will have gone out of business. Their industries will have been made irrelevant. And if that sounds crazy, you just have to kind of go look at some of the trends and indicators to realize it's not crazy at all. It's happening. There's never been a period in economic history where the largest 1,000 companies in the world are at this much risk of being utterly irrelevant and disruptive as we are right now.
May I ask which industries is the disruption happening the most?
All of them. All of them. So, if you look at a Fortune 500 company today, you might be able to pick a handful that you could sit back and say you believe are going to be safe, that you would be willing to bet your money on 10 years from now are still going to be in business, are still going to be leading, but probably only a handful. And those that you pick, my guess is, you're going to find are extraordinarily diversified, right? They're doing lots of different things. So General Electric is probably going to be here a decade from now because GE is so many different things and so many different businesses. But, you know, take a pick at any industry. It's easy to say things like, well, transportation is going to be completely revolutionized. I mean, we have automated cars and automated trucks and automated trains and automated pilots and and that's no longer sort of a dream or a pie in the sky. That's like 5 years from now or 10 years from now kind of stuff. So massive industry disruption amongst transportation and logistics as automation comes into play there. But it's also other industries. You know, I sat with the CEO of a very large $50 billion insurance company based in the Chicagoland area. There's like 3, so you can think about which and I remember saying to him basically this, saying, you know what, entrepreneurs are going to create incredibly disruptive solutions that you need to harvest, that you need to be able to be with. And more on that in a little bit, but that's kind of what our core business has become today, is the intersection between the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the incumbent industry leaders, and how they can learn to collaborate and how innovation and ventures can grow from that. I'll explain that in greater detail. But I spent time talking to him. I said, you know, this is going to happen. And he really wasn't buying what I was selling. You could tell. He was kind of just sitting across the table like, yeah, you know. And finally, after a little while, he said, I got to tell you something. I'm a $50 billion company. Startups don't move my needle. You're wanting me to get involved with startups, but it's just, you know how much money it takes to be even relevant to my company, $50 billion company? And I said, well, that's true, but not for nothing. I can name a dozen companies today that didn't exist 10 years ago that have a higher market cap than you. Maybe not in your industry, but are more valuable than you, and they didn't exist 10 years ago. And besides that, what do you think about crowdfunding? And the guy looked back at me and said, you mean like Kickstarter? You mean like that thing where you buy, you know, cool watches on? I said, yeah, I like that. Do you think that's going to have an impact on the insurance industry? He said, well, no, not really. So, well, I do. In fact, I think it's going to put you out of business in 10 years. Because I think the difference between the SEC legislation that allows 30 million Americans to become qualified angel investors is like one sentence of legislative difference between allowing 30 million Americans to build an algorithm on a website and self-insure each other. And the moment that two guys or girls in a garage build a smart algorithm that allows for mutual insurance, and now we change a little bit of legislation that allows people to just buy into mutual insurance in an unregulated way, why would I ever buy my insurance from State Farm or Allstate or any of these others? Right? Whenever I can do it myself. I like to tell you that he got up and walked out of that room saying, wow, this guy's wicked smart and we've got to do something right now. And he didn't. He basically walked out of that room thinking I was full of shit. But I'm not, and I think he's wrong. And I think if I were in the insurance industry, this global insurance industry, I'd be working. Financial services. We're in the headquarters of really fintech world. I mean, most of the innovation in fintech has come out of Chicago. So, you know, how stocks are traded, how commodities are traded. We have the Mercantile Exchange, which does more transactions in a day than the New York Stock Exchange does in a month. And yet, if I had to think about the future of the Mercantile Exchange, I'm not sure why they exist. At least not the way they exist today. Right? I mean, I think the Mercantile Exchange, at best, is an algorithm for trading. It is some form of trust solution for verifying who's doing the trading. It's some sort of payment transfer solution for how money gets exchanged. And gosh, you've got apps on your phone that do every one of those things. It might not do it at that scale or at that level, but someday, not too far in the distant future, I think we'll sit back and wonder about the nature of exchanges and financial services. Right. So, yeah.
Talking about a lot of changes that are probably going to come in the near future. What tips would you give to us as college students to become more competitive and employable? Although you said you're not an expert on that.
Well, no, I'll tell you, I think the one thing you can do to be the most employable possible is be entrepreneurial. And that doesn't mean that you have to go start a company. You can be entrepreneurial and go to work for a Fortune 500 company. But the talents, the skills, the agility of thought, the ability to sort of stay thinking outside the box, the ability to innovate, those are going to be the most necessary skills of the future. And so, today, historically speaking, the people who work in large companies and the people who tend to be out in the venture world are radically different types of people. Both good people, both very smart, they just see the world differently. They see risk differently. They see process and problem solving differently. And I think that's collapsing. I think that more and more large companies, large institutions are going to have to become more agile in thought and process, and they're going to need more entrepreneurial thinkers inside their organization. The truth is, all this disruption that I'm talking about, the people that are in the best position to lead that disruption are, in fact, the big companies and the industry leaders. And that's a bit weird of a way to think. How many of you have read, you know what the innovator's dilemma is? When you study like innovator's dilemma? So the innovator's dilemma is, it was a book about 10 years ago, it came out. It's a theory that says, when you're so good at something, when you're really a big company and you're focused on that thing which you do extraordinarily well, that you can't really take your eye off that ball long enough to try it a different way. You can't take your eye off the ball to disrupt yourself. And that's therefore the great innovator's dilemma, right? I mean, McDonald's makes a cheeseburger and sells that cheeseburger in a very specific way. Think about it. You walk into a McDonald's, where's the French fries? It's over here on the left. Where's the shake machine? Right here. Where's the bathroom? They're always down here around the corner to the right. McDonald's has reduced selling a cheeseburger to no variable. It's exactly the same experience everywhere you go. And now the innovator's dilemma is McDonald's is not Five Guys, right? and can't try to be Five Guys or any pick your whatever else it is. So that's a simple example of the innovator's dilemma. But that happens across the board. That's everybody. That's the insurance company I was talking about earlier. It says, I know how to do risk mitigation and financial services around insurance a certain way, and I cannot take my eye off the ball to be able to either, one, reinvent, or two, even see the disruption that's coming my way. So innovator's dilemma is a fairly common understood principle of 10, 15 years ago. I actually think there's urgency now to it. And I think innovator's dilemma is sort of a bit of a past way of thinking. I think it's now really more about survival. It's not innovation, it's survivalist innovation, right? I mean, these people have to figure out how to be able to do this. Because again, go back to those numbers I talked to you, 250 of the Fortune 500 are going to go out of business. They're going to merge, they're going to combine. And also you see this mass collision between industries. I mean, how long will it be before Ford becomes Google or Google becomes Ford? I mean, that's what's happening out there. Google is racing to become a car company at the exact same time that Ford is racing to become a technology company. And that collision is going to result in a lot of consolidation of industries and companies, and then add automation to the picture as well. It's just going to become kind of great.
Can you take it back to when you were talking about in 2011 or 2007 when you were just starting up TechNexus?
Yep.
And now you start talking about this more like kind of globally competitive environment that we're in now. Do you maybe take us through a little bit like what comparable cities to Chicago were doing in tech at around that time? And if you think we've caught up or lag behind a little bit?
I'm not, I spent a long time sort of as a de facto Chicago cheerleader. Part by choice and part because there wasn't anybody else that was doing that. And also the choice part of it was because it became really clear to me very early on, all the way back to those very first year parties in the office, that I needed a better swamp to build businesses in. And I wanted friends that I could rely on who were also out there doing things with me going through the same experiences. That I recognized very early on that we got on, when we jumped in the car and we went to the University of Illinois Computer Science Department, or we came over to the ball and we talked to computer science students, that in order to recruit and keep talent here, we had to be doing it collectively instead of individually. Right? So I have been a cheerleader for a long time. That said, I've never been in this camp of how are we compared to. Right? So first off, everybody wants to say, how do we compare to Silicon Valley? Well, we don't. And it's an entirely different community, it's an entirely different industry, and we frankly don't want to be Silicon Valley. I mean, the problem with Silicon Valley is that it is a one industry town. And by definition means that it is a boom or bust kind of town. It also means that it's largely just a bunch of vendors, sellers, creators, but not a lot of buyers. You know what Chicago has going for it? The customers are here. There are no customers in Silicon Valley. The customers are here. Within Chicago, you've got, I think, 13 different industries, none of whom occupy more than like 5% of the GDP of Chicago. So we're enormously diversified. I mean, and we've also got the number 1, 2, or 3 leader, the top 1, 2, or 3 company in every one of those industries. So the number 1, 2, or 3 company in financial services and exchanges, in real estate, in healthcare, manufacturing, and all of these industries, they're all here. Those companies are here. I think within 100 miles of Chicago, there are 1,350 mid-market firms, companies between 100 million and $1 billion in revenue. That might not sound all that much, but there's no city anywhere in the world that has that many mid-market companies as we have here in Chicago. Mid-market is where we sell things to. It's where. So now, as you start to think about what our competitive advantage may be in the long term, it's that since we know all of these number 1, 2, and 3 companies are going to be destabilized, are already being destabilized, and we know that all these major industries are sort of combining and colliding and changing, and it's technology that's driving all of that. Wouldn't you want to be where those customers are? And the talent that you want to be able to recruit, if you're going to go build a fintech startup, should probably have experience coming out of things like the mercantile exchange and the trading industry. And the talent is all over the place here for that. The talent that you would want if you were going to go build some sort of software or technology solution that changes real estate should come from with some degree of experience in the real estate industry. And again, that's here. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot at TechNexus, and Matt's probably heard me speak about this in the past, is I think entrepreneurs solve the problems that they see. And that's why one of the challenges with innovation out of places like Silicon Valley historically has been because it's largely made up of 23-year-old single males living in an urban core. You haven't seen a lot of like innovation around healthcare. Because you know what, 23-year-old single males living in the urban core don't spend a lot of time thinking about healthcare. You do see a lot of dating apps. You do see, because that's a problem that they need solved, right? You do see, apps to hail a cab. Well, that one worked out pretty well so far. Uber was not a bad idea. But again, that was a problem that a young person living in an urban core saw as a problem. I need to optimize the way to hail a cab. They're not solving really harder problems or problems that they don't see. And so that's a big part of what we do today is really go to sort of these incumbent industry leaders and learn what it is that they think is a strategic view of the future of their industry. And then come back to the entrepreneurial community and try to present, you harness that innovative thinking, that brain power, that risk-taking tolerance that exists in the entrepreneurial community to say, go solve this problem. Right? If I just go talk to the CEO of insurance companies all day and say, how are we going to reinvent this thing? he's never going to sit around and say, well, I think we're going to blow it up completely and start from scratch. But if I can go talk to him and get a little bit of insight into that industry and think about it a little bit and go back to my entrepreneurial friends and say, let's think about how to do this, then we build better businesses. We build more disruptive businesses. We build innovation as a result of that. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some of the companies that you mentioned that once were bigger, now are smaller. Even when you tell them the future, even when they look at the future themselves, I can't think of any example where they blew up their own model.
It doesn't happen very often, right? I mean, I think that
Kodak, Xerox.
yeah, Kodak, Xerox. I mean, these are companies that didn't exist. Haven't existed in your life, most of your lifetimes, but at one point were wildly successful, incredibly innovative companies. I mean, you don't have to go that far. So Motorola is a client of ours, is a partner of ours. Motorola, I was at Motorola last week. I was in their innovation center. They've got a museum inside the innovation center. It's incredible. I mean, it's no bigger than this room, but you can walk around that Motorola museum and you can literally see the very first wireless device ever, the very first walkie-talkie, the very first broadcast systems for radio and television that they pioneered, the very first mobile phones, the very first cable modems that created broadband connectivity, really the backbone of the internet. All of these things were invented right there. And yet, arguably at one time, I would say one of, if not the most innovative company on the planet is just a shell of its former self today. And part of that is because of that innovator's dilemma. They couldn't figure out how to reinvent themselves. Part of that was because of the disruption that came from elsewhere. Now, what's interesting about Motorola is they've now broken themselves up into so many smaller parts that they might actually, the smaller parts, may be innovating again. And so my collaboration with Motorola today is around the portion of Motorola that's remained here in town. It's called Motorola Solutions. And largely all Motorola Solutions builds and sells today are things like two-way radios and public safety devices, the communications tools that firemen and police and those types of people use. That's really their core business today, that portion of Motorola. And they're innovating again. They're innovating around that. They're innovating around the connected police officer of the future, or the connected fireman of the future, or public safety of the future. They're innovating around that. And they're working with us to bring entrepreneurs into that conversation because they recognize that they can't invent the future by themselves. They certainly can't invent all of the future by themselves.
What segment do you consider yourself in that regard? Working with these larger organizations, social platform companies, they're almost outsourcing a lot of innovation.
In some ways,
idea generation.
yeah. In some ways, what we are. So there's a notion called open innovation. There's not a lot of people doing this. I mean, it's, what segment? It's kind of hard to define. I mean, I find myself saying, explaining it over and over and over again to people because in some ways we're doing things that no one's done like this before. And part of it it's not just because we're smart guys, it's because the timing just wasn't right? The urgency wasn't there. Now all of these companies have realized it's sort of funny if you look at them over the last 5, 6, 7 years. McDonald's has opened an innovation lab in Silicon Valley. Okay, right? I mean, Anheuser-Busch opened an innovation lab in Silicon Valley. And if you talk to the CEO of Anheuser-Busch, he will tell you that it's got this office in Palo Alto, it's his innovation center, it's the most cool part of the entire company. It's incredible. He's been there like 3 times, and when he walks in there, people are just off the street throwing ideas at them. But it's largely innovation theater. It's largely they're just kind of going through the motions because they haven't yet figured out how to actually take maximum advantage of that open innovation zone. Back to the idea of entrepreneurs solving problems they see. If I ask a room full of maybe you guys, I'm going to give you more credit than the average typical entrepreneur. But if I went into a typical incubator or a typical college campus or something, and I said, hey, I need you to give me your best 3 or 4 ideas for Anheuser-Busch. What's the coolest tech solution that you can come up with for Anheuser-Busch? Does anybody, just what would you say? Anybody got some ideas right now?
Well, it's not really an idea, it's just that for Anheuser-Busch, we wouldn't really know what to really think about it, because all we really see is just can.
So that's kind of the point, right? So if you think about it for a little while, if I say just go, study it for a second, my guess is a lot of you would come back with ideas that are things like apps to check how busy the bar is, or have beer delivered to my dorm room, or those kinds of things. And it's not because those are problems you see, right? How do I get beer delivered to my dorm room? That's a problem you see. But if I told you that Anheuser-Busch is also the largest farmer in America and the largest consumer of water in the world, now all of a sudden it begins to introduce like new problems for you to solve. Now you're not just thinking about apps to deliver beer to my dorm room, but you're also thinking about drones that fly over crops that maybe tell me what the condition of the crops are in, or you're thinking about water conservation technologies or things that are not obvious. So I think that's a big part of what we do today is we try to go to these big companies and learn what it is that they think needs to be innovated out there, but that they may not be able to do on their own for a whole bunch of reasons. And then we go back to the entrepreneurial ecosystem and we say, we should be building this. But then the missing link is not just that strategy alignment. The missing link is also going back and reconnecting these two after the innovation has started to get rooted, because it's still going to be the big guys that can help bring this to market at scale. I mean, entrepreneurs fail at such a spectacular rate. And one of the reasons why they fail at such that rate is because they don't have market access. They don't have market experience, they don't have proper capitalization. But if you can go back to, but who has that? Well, Anheuser-Busch has that, right? What they don't have is the agility of thought or the process or innovation. So if we can go and jumpstart that and then bring those two back together again, and the way we do that is really from a venture perspective. So we're trying to do venture investing in concert with a lot of these corporations and teach them how to do better, smarter, earlier venture investing than they do today, to get real value out of that. Make sense? Okay. Other questions? Yes.
Well,
Oh, why do you think some of these big companies that have this fortress mindset, that the fortress can't be breached? That's to show that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a variety of reasons. So in no particular order. One was because that was best practice. So for decades, have you heard of things like Six Sigma? And so for decades, the best practice of companies like GE and Motorola and others was the notion of reducing all variables to risk. What is it that your job is? What are you supposed to do? What are the key performance indicators for your job? How do I measure whether you've done your job well or not? And how do I take the risk of failure out of the process? Because we've got too much on the line to fail, right? I mean, we make a car at Ford, and the way we make this part to go into the bigger part has to be perfect every time. And so by process, we've done that. So that's one reason, by process. And so I think some of the companies are beginning to rethink that now. Some of the companies are beginning to say, how do we introduce agile thought process and methodology? But process is one reason. I think another one is people. So it took me a very long time to understand that I'm a different person than everybody else, right? That we're all different, we're all individual. It took me a long time to understand that not everybody thought the notion of just throwing caution to the wind, taking risk and running out there and starting companies and maybe not being able to feed your family tomorrow and maybe having to go to the pawn shop and make payroll was a perfectly normal thing to do. Seemed normal to me. I had no reason not to do it. But I recognize that there are other people who think differently. In fact, maybe it's been a while now, but 7, 8, 9 years ago, I lectured at your MBA program here at DePaul. It was a particular night class. I don't remember what the theme of the class was, but the professor would bring random people in to give a guest lecture similar to this. And it was the first time I'd ever come into a university setting like this to kind of get a little bit of a speech. And I walked in, and it was right in the, I think the Iraq War was it either just ended or we maybe were in the middle of it, but war was on people's minds. And so war analogies were on people's minds. And I walk into this crowded classroom, there's like 60 people in the room, and most of the people in the room who were pursuing their MBA were already employed somewhere else. Many of them were kind of middle-level managers at Verizon Wireless looking to get an MBA to move to the next level. Okay, I mean, it was people who didn't necessarily see the state of the world the same way that I did. I walked in and I grabbed like a white board marker, and I don't know that I actually looked at the crowd very much at all. I kind of turned my back, and I had this amazing damn analogy about like in putting entrepreneurial activity in the lexicon of like war, right? And so you got the guerrilla warriors out here, and you've got the supply chain, and the people that are dropping in the supplies from behind, and you've got the front line, and you got the back line, and you got the and I'm just drawing this whole thing out on the whiteboard, and I'm really getting into it. And not only am I getting into it, but I'm also throwing out the examples. You know, I'm like, if you haven't been to the pawn shop to make payroll, you have no idea what I'm talking about, and blah 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 blah. And I turn around and I look at the room, and they're in horror. I mean, like everybody in the room is like, this nut job, right? I mean, they had no idea how to relate to me. And I realized I had no idea how to relate to them either. I think there was like 2 people in the room who came up to me afterwards and was like, right on. That's exactly what I think. That's exactly how I think. It was like 2 people out of the 50 that were in the room, right? The rest of them got up and walked out of there going, this guy's a nut. I wouldn't want to work with him at all. There's different mindsets. So people are part of the problem, right? People who are attracted to the notion of going to work in a stable environment, I'm gonna have a job for a fairly long period of time, where I know what my job is every day, I can feel good about going home at night, having done my job. Those tend to be attracted more to those kind of bigger established markets. So I think people, you know, the risk-taking has been sort of strangled out of a lot of those big companies. I think the notion of capital, so process is one, people is another. So your question was, why are these big companies not doing this? So process is one, people is another. Capital is another one. I remember one time a few years ago, we went to State Farm Insurance down in Bloomington, Illinois. And State Farm was in the middle of when he was giving me the tour, and they were openly bragging. They were in the middle of the largest IT project that anyone had ever estimated in a single setting. So cool. 36 million man hours. Somebody had the guts to sit back and say, that project is going to take 36 million man hours. Not 35, not 37, they just literally pulled down their ass. That's going to be 36 million man hours over a period of time, you know. And they were really happy about that. They were openly bragging that they were in the middle of this 36 million man hour project. And that was a level of risk that they were completely comfortable with. But if I asked them for $200,000 and a team of 4 to go try something for 2 months, way too risky. Way too risky. Right? In fact, they did say, if you ever talk to any of our executive team, please don't ever use the word venture around them, because you will scare the hell out of them. Now, this is an ultra-conservative company, and I get it. You know, they're in the nature of mitigating risk. That's their business. But when you're comfortable with capital that's like, I know how to fund 36 million man-hour projects, but I have no idea how to fail with $200,000. That's a problem. And so I think the nature of capital and the nature of risk is another reason. Other questions or thoughts? So how many of you would consider yourselves to be kind of entrepreneurial, crazy, nutty? Okay. Don't lose sight of that. And especially if you want to go into a consulting gig or a big company gig, I think too few people go down that path and sort of preserve that notion of risk-taking and agile process. I think too few of them go in and they end up getting thrown into the machinery of the company. And suddenly now, you know, you're getting a paycheck, spouse is at home, depending on that paycheck coming in every week as well, and now there's kids, and now there's mortgage, and now there's, now all of a sudden I got KPIs and key performance indicators back at the job, and damned if I didn't wake up 10 years from now and go, how did I get here? And now I don't really have the ability to work outside the box. So regardless of where you go to work, if it's in a big company especially, try not to lose sight of that.
So you say you try to work mainly with B2B businesses. I'm one of those schools who's trying to do, also consumers, right? I would like to make a science education website. So
You can make a what?
A science education website.
Science education website. Okay.
So and that's just gonna be students like you guys.
Okay.
But who should I talk to here in Chicago?
Yeah. Well, so don't get me wrong. I think consumer solutions are great. I just tend to always look at them through the prism of who are the existing sort of businesses and channels that are involved in the industry that's involved. Right? So if I think about, you want to create a science education website. Education is so hard. But, for what age of target?
Initially, like high school, then moving on to college, moving on to grad school.
So certainly post-secondary, so college and graduate and later education. My brain would immediately go towards thinking about all of the existing schools and classes, right? So whether they're the DeVrys of the world that are the for-profit colleges, or I've spent a fair amount of time with a few locally. Purdue is a very interesting situation going on in Purdue right now. The dean of the School of Technology at Purdue, who's a really interesting guy. He'll say, I don't really care if anybody graduates from my program. Well, it's kind of a bizarre thing for a dean of engineering to say, or a School of Technology. He said, no, don't get me wrong. It'd be great if they do, but I want them to leave school the moment they're ready to leave school. And if that happens to be before they've got their degree, that's fine with us. And that's sort of something that the entire university is beginning to sign on to. And they recognize that the process of education is probably, over the next decade or so, is not going to be this, I go to school for 4 years and I sit in the classroom for 4 years. It's probably more of a continuing education. People are going to leave, they're going to come back. In his mind, somebody comes to the School of Technology at Purdue and 3 years in, they're ready to go start a company or go to work for something. He said, you know what, if they're successful, A, they're probably still going to come back and finish their degree with me at some point, and B, they're probably going to become a donor to the school and somebody we can be proud of. And so they just have sort of embraced that, and I think that's really, really bold. I mean, education, in my mind, is one of those industries very near the top of the list that is most ripe for total disruption. Right? So you can look at what you're doing as a consumer play. I'm trying to teach educative science online, and I got to go get a bunch of eyeballs signed up. Or you can think of it more as an industry play. What I'm really trying to innovate here isn't bringing a curriculum of science to consumers. I'm really trying to innovate the way people learn. And that's more compelling to me, right? Because I think that's where you start getting disrupted.
I see it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think the eyeballs by this new.
Yep. And again, so many people think about, consume. So for example, think about some of the bigger consumer brands in Chicago. So Groupon. I don't think Groupon at its best was a consumer play. Grubhub. I don't think Grubhub at its best is a consumer play. I mean, from the consumer's perspective and from the media's perspective who writes about these things, Grubhub is a consumer business, right? It's about how you can get food delivered to your house quickly. I actually think of Grubhub more from it innovated and changed the way that small restaurants were able to reach new customers and deliver food to new customers. And so as you're building that business, if you're Grubhub and you're building that business, how much of your resources, who's your customer? The college student ordering a pizza to be delivered to their dorm room is the obvious customer of Grubhub, but it's probably not the most valuable customer for Grubhub. The most valuable customer for Grubhub, the people you have to keep happy, are probably the pizza companies, the small restaurants. And so as you build your technology, you build your business, you build your revenue models, you build your value proposition, you're building it towards the notion of sort of that B2B to C in that particular.
So, this may come over a little direct but I just wondered, how exactly does TechNexus make money?
Yep.
Do you guys, do you lease space? Do you make venture investments? How exactly?
Yep. All of the above. So historically, where we've made money is in the beginning we were just a community, right? So in the beginning, things like there were the 300 companies that were based there, and some of them paid rent, some of them paid equity, some of them just couldn't pay anything at all, but somehow we managed to break even and stuff. Today, if you haven't been there, we have a 50,000 square foot facility over at the Civic Opera Building. It's the full floor of the Opera Building, and on Wacker Drive there, and it's completely full and busting at the seams, and it pays for itself. So there's never been, unlike some of the other programs in town, there's never been a dollar's worth of government money that subsidizes it. We bootstrapped it from the very beginning, and the goal of the facility is to pay for itself. Where we make our money today is largely around the venture investment and or the collaboration with those corporate partners. So we're working on some new models today, which we've been working on for probably the last 6-8 months. We did all sorts of things along the way. We did sort of fee for service. So a Motorola type company can come to us and say, I need to go do this, this, and this in the ecosystem, or I need you to go build the ecosystem. I'll pay you to do that. And that was okay, but that's not really fun and exciting, right? I mean, getting paid to do something like you go hire a consultant. They won't do it as well as we can, but I don't want to be a consultant. And we tried sort of pure venture models where we say, all right, well, you guys have huge balance sheets. Maybe we should be investing your capital. Maybe you should be a limited partner in a private equity play. The problem with that is I actually think fundamentally the venture capital business is terrible and is broken and has been broken for a decade. It used to be 10, 15 years ago that a VC, you went to a specific VC, not just because they had the ability to write a check, but primarily you went to them because of their Rolodex. I mean, there's people in this room probably don't know what Rolodex is, right? But I mean, you went there because of their contacts, their network. And they would say, I have a better network than the guy across the street. You'd rather take money from me than not. But the truth is that whether it's social networking or it's just the collaborative nature of the industry, so much has changed in the last 10 years. Between my partner Fred and I, and Fred who runs the Technology Association, there's modestly nobody who has as strong a network in this town as we do. We literally know everybody. And it's not because we happen to have the biggest bank account. It's just because that was the nature of our business. We needed to know everybody. And so now when we come to say, well, why am I taking money from that particular VC? Them saying, well, because I know people doesn't do anything. And the nature of investments, this idea, typical VCs, you're right, sort of the $1, $2, $3 million checks in a Series A round, and then sit back and wait for Series B, C's, and D's that get kind of squashed down, or they have to keep following on their own investment just to preserve their position. And then their capital is often locked up for 5 to 7 years. And then on top of all that, the nature of IPOs is going, very, very few companies are IPOing anymore. So how does VCs get their capital out? Particularly in a consumer business, where are you going to get your capital out? There are fewer and fewer options for getting your capital out, and it's taking longer and longer in order to be able to do that kind of stuff. Companies are staying private longer. There's lots of problems in my mind with the traditional venture capital model. So what we've come up with instead is this notion of what if we found a way to leverage their balance sheets, these corporate customers, in a joint venture of sorts, where it's smaller dollar amounts. It's not, they're not putting $50 million to work in a venture fund. They're putting $5 million to work in kind of building the ecosystem. And we can take that capital and go off and invest in smaller companies at earlier stages, and focus on very quick exits. Focus on not trying to maximize the return on capital. How do I put money to work to get a small company to be a really good company, a really good vendor for Motorola, a really good acquisition target for Motorola, or a really good channel partner for Motorola, and use their capital in a way that makes that happen over a short period of time. And then hopefully you can just get the capital back. Right? So you put $100,000 into something, bust your tail for 12 months to try to help the company, and then you get $100,000 back or $200,000 back. You give that back to the corporate partner, but now you've got the equity, and now you've got a better company, and now you've got an interesting business model. So that's what we're working on now. It's kind of a hybrid solution of private equity and outsourced R&D. And I don't really know other people that are doing that yet.
Great, thanks, Terry.
Yeah. Matt has my contact information, so if you guys have any questions or anything, if you want to come over, and Matt still has the keys, I think, so if you can, he could probably give you a tour of the place at some point. If you guys want to walk over there and take a tour. Okay. Stop by and say hello.
All right, let me get my 2 cents in real quick here.
Thank you. Thanks. I don't think I know what you say.
Yeah, yes.
Economics? Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, thanks for coming in, Terry. Really appreciate it. Okay, so how many of you guys have all your textbooks yet? Raise your hands. Okay, I don't have any of them. So basically, there's another textbook app, right? There are, 100,000 of them now. But what's different about this one is that actually if you sell it to someone at default, a used book, you get to keep 100% of the profit. And actually if you buy a new book or something through their price comparing system, the Paul CEO is actually going to get a little cut of that. And this is just something we're doing to get some money. We never charge membership fees or anything like that. So yeah, if you guys just want to support us a little bit when you're buying books this quarter, just go ahead and check out this link, depaul.text.com. That'll be great. And December 29th, 2 weeks from now, same room, same location, or same room, same time. We've got this company called Startup coming in, real hot, Chicago startup, and they're looking for internships if you're trying to touch base with them. Great. Thanks for coming, guys. That's a solid first event.
Yeah.
Hey, Danny, how's it going, man?
Good, how are you? Sorry, I kind of.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for coming by, man. It's coming well.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was our first event so far this year. So.
Yeah.
It's been cool. Yeah, how's a real estate club going?
I'm finally leveraging my board in my favor,
All right, nice.
which we're gonna see about that because
Yeah, absolutely.
and it's like I had a great board last year, but I had
I'm trying to decide.
people that people like you or me, they take on a lot.
No, I don't
They have
know.
more,
I changed my major
by my board this
between
year.
management.
Quite like that.
Mhm.
Which works out to get actually everything.
Nice. All right.
And I'm finding out that I can't tell them, hey, go do this task. I have to break this down. And like, get people all
What's
the
wrong?
Gotcha.
So I'm doing that.
Is that like, are you saving time, you said?
I'm just getting people to do other work.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's, I would like you to save time.
Yeah.
I'll be seeing you around hopefully.
October.
Yeah, no, we're
We're at a point where when I have my training, we have an event. So hopefully it's good.
We'll see you.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Danny,
what's going on?
How you doing?
All right.
Pretty good.
Hey, let me introduce you to Danny real quick.
Yeah.
Danny?
Yeah, this
Going on,
is
man?
Keenan, Michael, and Elizabeth. They're studying abroad.
Senior. Yeah, I'm a senior. I'm a freshman with this, so
I'll see you.
nice to meet you.
So did you like organize this whole thing?
Yeah,
See you
how's
guys.
it going, man?
Hi, I'm Jesse.
Matt, nice to
Matt,
meet you.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, man. Yeah, thanks all for coming out. We've got a bunch of cool stuff planned this quarter, so. Are you guys in the Facebook group?
Yes.
Okay.
I will be there.
All right, great. Yeah, just check that. That's where we put everything cool that's coming up that we've heard about at least.
Is that where we'll find contact information?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or I
Mostly,
can,
or-
Post it up on. Should we post it on?
It was really-
I mean, yeah, I can post it up on the Facebook. If you want his email, it's just his name, Terry, at TechNexus.com. So TERRY. And yeah, I should probably post that on.
I'd say that even email following. I don't know
Yeah.
how he feels about like make sure you post it. I don't know.
Yeah, dude, his info's everywhere. And I'd have to answer the phones at Technic. either? Mispronouncing his last name.